This is the kit for Lots of Love candle mats. These are the mats, and they are very small. This is the size, it's 1 inch. And these are the very tiny buttons, button pennies. They're very difficult, at least for me, to pin. This is, if you use the embroidery stick pins, this is what it would be. It's still quite a large pin to go around, but you can do that. What I like to do is glue them. Elmer's glue, just regular school glue, in a dish. I put saran wrap on the dish first, and then I just have my saran wrap so that when I'm not using it, I cover it over, and Q-tips. I find that the white ones, the white glue is much better than regular glue because I can see. And I will just do a little bit here to show you, but I want to set the mats out and show you how to do that. So, your penny, just a very tiny bit of glue. And because it's white, you can see it, so you know how much is there. And then you just place it on your penny, hold it down for a minute. And once my mats are set out like this, and I have the top one glued, I do like to press them with an iron. I think it helps quite a bit. So that is the glue. Now, the next thing we'll do is set out the mats as how they come in the kit. And this is actually what happens when you glue both the top and the bottom penny. That's how they are, and they work really good. You can handle them. You can also glue everything with the candle mats so that that's all you need to do is stitch. However, if you want to do it the old-fashioned way with pins, you would just pin them and possibly do the top penny, I would think, on this one, because it's so small that to get 2 pennies and put your rug together and then do both of them, it's going to be a lot of stick pins. So we will go on to the next part, and I will show you how to set the rug out from the kit. This is how you would set out the candle mats. I should say before that these were my samples that I used to test the glue. These are not the candle mats that we have on for the kit. It's these and they're much larger. So these are just my examples of how things are when they're finished and everything is glued, and that's all you need to do is stitch. The kit comes as this. There will be, of course, a pattern front and written pattern instructions along with this video. But for the kit, this is candle mat 1. I'll show you. The octagon is candle mat 1. The diamond is candle mat 2. So in your kit, everything is organized into packages. This is candle mat 1, and it's the center. And I will show you. It's the centerpiece, just in one package. Second row is the row around the center. And I do have another one here somewhere. There would be the third row, and then this is the last row. So I have it down here. With the diamond, there are 4 in the center. There is the center row next to that, and there is the last row, the outside row. I always include lots of extras. You have lots of extras of the little button pennies along with all of the different colors, because my experience has been, if you have kitties, they love the circles, and sometimes they get lost. You also have the base for each one. This is the octagon base. It's a square, and you'll notice that it's pressed in four sections, and I'll show you about that and what to do. And this is the diamond one, like this, and you have lots of extra wool on that. So we'll go about and set out one of the mats. They're both set out pretty much exactly the same, with the exception of the center. So you would open your fabric, and I will do, you put for this one, the octagon one, oops, you start with your penny directly in the center of your guides, and then you would put the other pennies around it for a circle. Now, when you get to these, I hope I have this in camera line. When you get to these, the penny goes on each side, like this. It goes in the center of the bottom. Up and down is center. These are each side. And those are sort of guides that keep your rug straight and all of the pennies interlocking. Those are just your guidelines. You would continue. This goes on the center. On the center. This one goes in the center because it's interlocking. And then you just keep filling in with your pennies. And make sure that they're scrunched and touching. So fill that in. Oh, I lost my little penny. So easy to do. So this one, just make sure that they're touching. Now, if you find it easier to do, and sometimes I do this, you notice when you're putting the pennies together that the wool is sort of lifted up. What I sometimes do is I just take a running stitch with the guides and put it in, and then I'll press it so that it's nice and flat, so that it doesn't have that like this. It will work out. But for a small mat like this is just fine. I mean, you're not going to go astray on a couple rows, especially with the small pennies. The other thing I would like to mention is sometimes you'll have a penny that's off-centered. It's like an oval, and it has to do with how we cut them. That's all you do is find the bias and make it round again. And there are, I do try to check them, but there are certain times where there may be a little fuzz on the outside. So if you do see that, just give it a little snip. I try to do every kit with laying the pennies out. I do this exactly for every kit, and then I press them and I put them in the bag. So sometimes I may miss, but that is the first part. And now what we will do is glue these on. And I'll show that in the next video. So I now have glued all of my small pennies. They are glued. And now we set out our mats to finish it. Now, if you are doing pins, if you're using pins for the second one, that's fine. You really don't have to do what I'm going to show you as you do with the glue. So you would just set them out and pin them. If you have already done the first penny with the stitch, then that's fine. That's half the work done. But you would just keep going, keep adding more rows and stitch them. So these are your guidelines. Doubles here, one on each side, this way, one in the middle. So I'll get rid of that. Now, if you're doing the glue for the entire one, to have your piece like this, I think I should adjust my lighting a bit. So if you are doing this, where you're using pins, what I suggest you do is you just open your package. Everyone is labeled, and just lay them out somewhere and do your top penny. And then just put them back in the package so they're all ready to go when you want to pin it. But if you're doing the pennies and you're going to glue them and have your finished rug so that you can stitch it, this is what I suggest. Instead of this, where you have the guidelines ironed in, I suggest when you get your backing, you do a running stitch for your guidelines to have it nice and flat in order to do the glue. Actually, I didn't have a dark thread. I'd suggest you use a dark thread, just long running stitches for something to put your pennies by, and a guide. So this is how you would start it. I do suggest that you put all of them on. Just fill in. And it goes much better if you have your wool ironed, and after you glue your pennies, if you iron those too. And I will show you that in a minute. And the two sides go on each side this way. It goes much better if the wool is pressed and ironed. And you keep laying it out. Interlocking the pennies, they go much nicer if they're this way. If you're pinning it, you can adjust as you stitch, but with the glue, you need to have as perfect as possible. And the long way for the diamond, there is an extra one in the middle on each end. There. Now we have the 2 rows. There are 3 rows. We only go this far. So I will glue those, and how I glue them is I would just lift them up. Just a little bit of glue, not much. Put them back in, press. Start from the center. I better put that down. Keeping your guidelines. You also will notice with the Q-tips that they'll get soggy and they'll have a bit of string on them. So that's your cue to change a new Q-tip. And if you dry this end, then you can have these two to do again. I don't like to do them when they're wet because I get my hands full of glue. It's a bit messy. Not very much glue, but you can actually tell how much with the white glue. You have a chance to adjust them, but they do dry very quickly. And I will show you what happens if you do make a mistake and you have to take the glue away. So you would just keep doing this. Now, I'm not going to do a complete video. There is another kit. It's Cynthia's Diamond. It's done exactly the same way. And I'll just lightly review over things, but I'll put a timestamp in this one so that you understand and you can see. A diamond is a diamond. It's just the amount of rows in the diamond. So I will finish that and I will be back. So this is the second one of the candle mats. We've taken them out of the package and we've glued the centers on, and then we've did our lines to keep them even, our guides, and we're ready for the last row. And this is what happens. Very nice without pins. So for the last row in this kit, it's an open edge penny, which means the pennies are open on the edge and the base is hidden in the back. So we can do everything before we even do the first stitch on this with glue. Now, this is how you remove the backing to have the open edge penny. And what I use anytime that I need to mark on wool, I find it's very nice to use just the cheap masking tape, just the dollar store variety. There are times when you should, if you're using masking tape or anything else that you glue on wool, that you put on wool, sometimes you need to take the sticky off, but I find this is the cheap tape and it's fine. So we're going to use the tape to mark around to cut our wool. And it's very simple. You just line your tape up with the edge of your, not your last row, you're next to the last row. And this is actually what it's going to look like. So we'll put the tape around and I'll show you how to measure to get the right size edge for your pennies. Let me just keep putting it around. If you don't have masking tape, let's say you're doing a rug and you can't find your tape, Scotch tape would work the same. It's just not as easy to put your line on, but it will work. So there's my masking tape. I should put that up a bit. You need to make sure, because you will have a penny on this edge, so you need to make sure that you have your tape out a bit. There. Now, how do you measure your pennies? How do you know the size that you need to cut? Well, it's pretty simple. You just put your 2 pennies in here where they will go for your last row. You need, let's see if I can put this here. In any open edge penny, no matter what size your pennies are, your tape has to come out more than where the pennies meet. This is where it ends. This is how much you cut off, where the 2 pennies meet, so you don't have any of your backing. You see, it comes where the 2 pennies meet. You don't have any of your backing showing. So with this one, I've already measured it. And where am I? Okay, this is 1. And it's just this dot, whatever it is. I'm not good at measuring. So it was just the, wait now, this one. It's just this dot. That's where the 2 pennies meet. So all you do is you do some guidelines and you mark it. Just rough guidelines. Maybe I'll do it this way, which should be easier. The ruler even with your tape, and you only need to mark on the ends. If you're like me, maybe you just need to put a little mark there or something to remember. I'm not good with measurements. Okay, that'll be enough. You do the 2 ends. And then all you do is connect them for your cutting line. And it's so nice because you can use an ink pen, you can use a pencil. You don't have to worry about marks on your wool. This is a great tip for all sorts of things if you do wool. Okay, I won't do those, but I have done them on this one. This is the other part of the candle mat set, so I have those. So now I just take my scissors, which I shouldn't use these. Oh. Just remember not to use your good scissors when you're cutting tape or fabric or anything that's not cotton and wool. So you go through and you cut. Make sure you have your ends crossed. That's your line. There. And I should say, I also will have a video. When you have little scraps like this, I will show you, even if you're not a dyer, even if you don't use the acid dyes, I will show you how to use those and make different colors. So now you just remove your tape. Very gently. But the pennies are in place now with the glue, so that makes it much easier. Before I use glue, they would be pinned and stitched, and then I would stitch the last row on an open edge penny. Now there are other ways to finish penny rug other than the open edge method, but for this one, and I do have more videos to show different techniques on my YouTube channel, but for this one we're just not going to complicate things and do it. Okay, there it is. Now, the last row of pennies, which will always say the last row, and I should tell you, when you buy a kit from me, the teacher comes with. You can always message me, always go back to me if you're having a problem, and we will solve it together. Okay, so we have this part all glued, everything's glued. We're ready to put the last row on, and I will do that in the next session. So we are almost finished. Everything is glued, it's cut. Everything is going as planned. Your last row of pennies you would take out of your package and you would glue the tiny penny on, so they would be all ready to go. And it's just a matter of, now when you put your glue on for your last row, it's going to have this side out. So what you need to do is you need to put it on the edge and not the center. So you're not gluing in the center the same as you would all of the other ones. The outside row, because you don't want your glue showing after your stitches, so just a very little bit on the outside edge and fit them in. And it's as simple as that. Really very easy. Outside edge, remember, last row, not in the center. Just a very little bit of glue. Put them on. Now, when you come to the points, you're going to have a bit more going through. You have a bit more, but you still need to be very careful because this is half. These are much more. The points are much more, so very tiny bit on that. So you have to watch where you're putting your pennies on your base as far as the glue. Okay. So just a very little bit. Turn it. Make sure your glue is in this way. And put your penny in. And hold down. And then you would continue on and do all of your pennies and have them on. Now, I will do that off video. I won't make you watch me do all of that, and I will be back. So the candle mats are now glued. This is this one, and you'll notice the points on the back. Even though there's only a little bit, with this design, there's only a little bit that is on those edge pennies, and that's fine for stitching it. Now, what I would do is, with any of the candle mats, anything that you glue, before you do the last row, I would stitch this part of it. When you have the large piece of fabric like this, before you cut. It's much easier. It's simple. You have this fabric rather than just having this mat finished like this. Now, with this design, it's fine. You have the points. You have quite a bit here to glue. But with the design on the diamond shapes, it is not that much, just a little tiny bit there. And that's fine if you're stitching it. You certainly can stitch that. I would do just a couple extra stay stitches on those. These are fine. but still on your points, just do, when you're doing the stitch around, just do a couple extra up and down and hold it. Now, if you are very timid about just that little edge, I will show you a little trick. And put my camera a bit closer. Instead of doing the straight cut, do a little tab. Just mark it with your pen. Don't have square cuts, have it a bit rounded, because you know for the points it's difficult to do that stitch. So just have some little points, but if you do, have it on all fours. Just take your pen and mark a little bit. You can just judge. So you have an extra piece there, wider, to stitch it with. And again, with any of these, before you put the open edge on in the last row and you glue it, or you can use pins to stitch it, I would stitch this part first when it's attached to this. So the other thing is, you need, if you have guide stitches like I've made here, of course you'll have a different type of thread, a darker thread. You will need to pull them out. Now, it doesn't show on this side. I made the large stitches on the front. So you would just take your scissors and go through wherever you see the stitches and cut them and pull them out. One little note, when you're doing these stitches, the guideline stitches, and I suggest you do this on a larger rug. This is a small rug. We didn't do the guideline stitches on this, and there are the folds now, but you would get rid of those, of course, when you do the final work on the mat. Don't knot your thread anywhere in. If you have your thread, just do your stitches and have it through so that you can pull it out. You don't want knots. However, if you do need the stitches, just clip them and take them out, because you do know that the glue is there and you've glued. So you have glued your 1-inch penny to this thread. So you just need to take the thread out if you're using this method after you've completed the stitching. Now, with the diamond mats, with these, all of the points are the same. With the diamond mats, because of how they're laid out, because you have that extra penny to make it longer, this is what happens. You just have a little bit here, and you do have quite a bit here, because this is the row that the pennies are touching each other in a straight line. This is the row to make the diamond where you need a middle penny and off-centered. So it can be done, absolutely. And I will finish this one up. You just have to remember, if you only have a tiny edge like that, just a tiny, tiny bit of glue. And by the way, if you want to keep these and use them over again, once the glue is dried, you can still use them. They do tend to go like this and have a little piece on them. So once that happens, then I go to another one. So make sure that it's that way. Scrunch it in and hold it down. And finish this one off. Just make sure you don't have any of those things. This one has quite a bit, so we can do that. And I would suggest, instead of just going one after the other, I would leave the edges. Fit your pennies in here, fit them, do your points last. Now, I want to talk a little bit about thread. And of course, the thread is your choice. I would suggest using floss because a thicker thread is going to be, the stitches will be too strong with a thick thread. You can use any type of stitch. I think this one would be very nice, and I've used this thread that I'm going to show you, this thread. However, you can use whatever stitches you like. And I will say, this one, these are my samples, these are not the kits, but this one I used cotton for the backing, and I did turn down and glue the cotton, and then of course you would go through and do your blanket stitch for this. But cotton works very nice. Now there is a little something about cotton. If you put too much glue on your larger penny, you may see spots. There's one. It works good though. I will say it works very good, but you may see a little bit of hard spots or something like that. So in choosing the threads, this is 6 strands right off the skein. You would check your colors in your rug to make sure that nothing is very close. This one is quite close, but it's still a contrast there. You can see it. So you want something that will contrast but not stand out as far as the stitches go. So my go-to is always these neutral shades, different, this type of thing. This would look nice. It's a bit darker, but it looks nice. Still, it looks nice, but it doesn't stand out as much as the lighter shade does. The trick is, when you're testing your threads, yes, you can check with this when you're at the store or whatever, but always use the size of thread that you're going to stitch with, and this is 2 strands. So use the thickness of the thread that you're actually going to use for the stitches to check it. So we have the 2 candle mats now. They are ready to stitch. We have to take these out, of course. If you don't have guidelines, you don't have to worry about that. These are the 2 candle mats that are in the kit, and they're quite large actually for candle mats. So what could go wrong with the glue? And I will show you that in the next part of the video. So this is the last part of the video, and it's sort of what could go wrong with your glue. Perhaps it's your first time. This certainly is my first time for using glue. So let's say that you've glued it, pennies a bit off center, they're not interlocking, something like that. Well, this is what happens. Water is your best to have for accidents. The only thing that you need to do is take a sponge, cold water, and wet wherever is wrong. You just soak it with water, and you can tell there's enough water because the wool will absorb the water. And this is what happens. The pennies come off. The pennies come off. Then you just let them dry and use them again and correct your mistakes. It's the same with wool. However, when you do remove something, you need to wet the back and you need to wet the front too. Not a lot, and you don't need to let it dry. You just remove it and then let everything dry like this. So the other thing is, what happens, and I do have it here, there's just a little tiny bit of glue there showing because you put too much glue on your pennies. Well, that's fine, you know, if you don't mind that, that's okay. But this is what I suggest you do after it's stitched. We will just pretend that this is stitched. All the stitches are done. The backing is stitched, the blanket stitch. And now your mat is finished. The one thing that I don't like to do is after the mat is stitched with the threads, I don't like to iron it. Even with pressing cloth, I just don't like that. I would suggest that you iron the dickens out of it before you get the stitches on your mat. After that, you do exactly the same thing. You would do the backing first. You would use your water, and I'm not going to use it here because I've just recently done this with the glue. You would wet just plain water. Once it's wet, you put it on a towel or an old sheet or something like that. You use your hands, and you use the weight of your hands, press down on it, just like this. It's soaked on this side. Then you turn it over and you do the same thing on this side, except not as much water because the back has already absorbed the water and it will be there. You wet it with a sponge, or you can actually use a brush, just a paintbrush, and just put your water on, and then you go through and you press it. Just weight on your hands. Then you just take your mat, put it on a dry piece of towel or sheet, and you let it air dry. And it does make a difference. It does press it, but for some reason with the stitches it's not the same as the weight and the heat of an iron. Now you can go one step further, and many of my rugs I age, and this is the exact same method, except instead of just the clear cool water, I use a little bit of onion dye, and I will put it on with a paintbrush. After the clear water, I will just put the onion dye on certain places so that it looks a bit aged, a bit darker in one place than the other. And that's how you age your rugs and how you finish your rugs. Now these will be the Lots of Love candle mat kits. They will be listed. There's one more thing that I want to show you, and I really didn't think about this until just now. If you're hesitant about these little points, And really, if you want to do that little thing, you can, but I think this is a much better solution. You do your masking tape, cut, stitch, and then you have extra little pennies in your kit. Glue a penny or just hold it on the spots, because these are going to be difficult to do that blanket stitch and have the sharp corner. So this, and you now have little feet. You would stitch those round in place and you have little feet for your rug. Isn't that cute? That's a good idea. Just came to me too. Okay, so you can also do it on this. I mean, that would be a nice finish for any rug that you're doing, actually. The little feet. And you would put them so that you would have it halfway. Half your stitching would be on the penny, half would be on the base. Yes, that would be very nice. I think I'm going to do that with a lot of my rugs. It's just amazing how things come to me. And then you would need 2 more. But I will add quite a few extra of these. So in case you would like to do that, they will be in your kit. And I hope you enjoy, and I hope you enjoy stitching. Thank you very much for watching my video. The candle mat kits will be listed on my website, oldpennyrugs.com, all one word, Old Penny Rugs. So you'll find them there. And do remember, the teacher comes with your kit. If you have any problems at all, you just contact me through my website, or if you're on Facebook or Instagram, and I will be there to help. So happy stitching, and thank you again for watching my videos.